Most of your thoughts are not choices. They arrive uninvited, then quietly pretend they belong to you. You wake up inside a sentence already forming, a judgment already made, a worry already convincing. Without remembering when you agreed, you don't notice the moment it happens. Because it feels like thinking, not possession, not intrusion, not something separate from you. But here is the uncomfortable accusation most people avoid hearing: you are rarely thinking, you are being thought. Every emotion you feel begins as a sentence you never questioned. A narrative your mind rehearsed long before awareness showed up. You defend these thoughts instinctively, as if they were you, as if questioning them would mean losing yourself entirely. This is why silence feels threatening, because without noise, there is no familiar identity to cling to, only open space. You call it overthinking, stress, anxiety, realism, responsibility. But none of those words explain the deeper entanglement. The mind does not simply produce thoughts. It pulls you inside them, assigning roles, urgency, meaning, and emotional consequence. And the strangest part is not that thoughts appear, but that you almost never see the moment you disappear into them. So ask yourself carefully, when a thought arises and emotion follows immediately, who exactly are you being in that moment? And more importantly, if a thought can capture you so completely, what happens when you finally learn to see it instead? But this is where things become uncomfortable. Most people believe they are already in control of their thoughts because the thoughts sound like their own voice, familiar, logical, and internally consistent. When a thought appears, it feels intentional, as if you summoned it, examined it, and approved it before letting it speak. You assume awareness is happening simply because the thought is happening inside you, not realizing how different awareness actually feels. This belief is comforting, because it suggests the mind is a tool you are holding, rather than an environment you are inside. So, when stress rises, you believe you are thinking harder, solving faster, preparing better, doing what responsible minds are supposed to do. When worry repeats, you tell yourself it means you care. That attention equals control, and control equals safety. This belief lowers anxiety temporarily, because it frames mental noise as effort, not loss of agency. You even take pride in it, believing constant thinking proves intelligence, depth, and seriousness about life. And when someone suggests observing thoughts instead, it feels passive, irresponsible, even dangerous, like letting go of the steering wheel. After all, if you are not thinking, then who is making decisions, protecting you, predicting outcomes, preventing mistakes? So you stay loyal to thinking, trusting it as your primary defense against uncertainty, discomfort, and unpredictability. You believe the mind needs pressure to function, friction to sharpen, tension to stay alert and useful. And because this belief has helped you survive before, you see no reason to question it now. The illusion feels complete because nothing seems obviously wrong, only tiring, only heavy, only endlessly repetitive. So you accept mental exhaustion as normal, emotional reactions as unavoidable, and inner noise as the cost of being conscious. But what if this sense of control is not wrong? Only incomplete, missing something subtle you were never taught to notice. And this is where most people misunderstand what's really happening. If this is already making sense to you, it means you're starting to notice patterns most people never see. Subscribe and let's keep exploring how the mind really works. Now, this is where things start to get uncomfortable. There is a moment most people miss, so small it hides in plain sight, occurring just before a thought feels personal. That moment is not loud, not dramatic, not emotional, which is why it escapes attention almost every time a thought appears. And identification follows so quickly it feels like one single event, seamless and unquestioned. But psychologically, these are two separate processes: arrival and attachment, stimulus and ownership, signal and belief. The mind does not ask permission before generating content. It simply offers it based on memory, conditioning, and prediction. What feels like my thought is often just the most convincing suggestion available in that moment. And yet, the emotional weight does not come from the thought itself, but from how instantly you merge with it. This is the first crack in the story of control. Because if thoughts can arrive without invitation, they are not fully you. Still, this realization remains uncomfortable, because it threatens the sense of authorship you rely on for stability. If thoughts are not chosen, then identity becomes less solid, less defined, less certain. So the mind quickly closes the crack, returning to familiarity, returning to ownership, returning to this is me thinking. But once seen, even briefly, the crack does not fully disappear. It lingers as quiet doubt. And that doubt begins asking a deeper question, not about stopping thoughts, but about understanding their origin. But to understand this, we need to look deeper. The brain did not learn to think this way by accident. It learned through repetition, reinforcement, and survival-based pattern recognition. From early experiences, the mind discovered that certain thoughts created predictability, even if that predictability came with discomfort. Anticipating danger felt safer than being surprised. So the brain rewarded scanning worry and rehearsing possible outcomes. Each time a feared scenario did not happen, the mind credited the thinking, not the absence of threat. This is how thought became protection, not truth. A psychological shield shaped by past uncertainty. Neural pathways strengthened around vigilance. Because vigilance once reduced emotional shock and increased perceived readiness. Over time, thinking stopped being a response and became a default environment, always running in the background. The brain does not distinguish between useful thinking and repetitive thinking, only between familiar and unfamiliar. So it favors what it knows, even if what it knows creates tension, exhaustion, and emotional looping. Observing thoughts feels strange because it interrupts a long-established survival rhythm. The brain interprets this interruption as risk, not relief, because silence has no historical data to guarantee safety. And yet, beneath the noise, the brain is not just afraid, it is also being rewarded. There is a payoff hidden inside constant thinking, subtle but powerful, that keeps the loop alive. But this is where things become uncomfortable. The mind continues thinking because it gains something from it, even when the cost feels overwhelming and quietly exhausting. The payoff is not happiness, but familiarity. And familiarity creates the illusion of safety inside uncertainty. Thinking keeps the self feeling active, involved, and necessary, even when nothing is actually being resolved. There is comfort in mental movement, because stillness threatens the question of who you are without narration. The mind prefers control through commentary rather than risk the silence that exposes vulnerability. Even painful thoughts provide structure, and structure feels better than the open space of not knowing. Worry can feel like responsibility, and self-criticism can feel like self-awareness, even when neither is helpful. This is why observing thoughts feels uncomfortable. It removes the reward while leaving the uncertainty intact. Without constant thinking, the ego loses its role as manager, judge, and narrator, and losing that role feels like losing relevance, not peace. So the mind resists observation by pulling you back into identification again and again, but this resistance points to something deeper, something tied not to thoughts themselves, but to who you believe you are. And this is where identity quietly enters the picture. Over time, thoughts stopped being events and started becoming descriptions of who you think you are. You are not just thinking anxious thoughts, you are an anxious person, and that label feels stable and familiar. Identity forms around repetition, and repeated thoughts slowly solidify into psychological self-definitions. Logic does not undo this because identity is emotional, not rational, and it protects itself instinctively. When you try to distance from thoughts, the identity feels threatened, as if something essential is being removed. This is why advice fails, because it addresses behavior while the mind is protecting belonging and continuity. The identity says, if I am not my thoughts, then who am I? And the question feels destabilizing. So the mind clings tighter, reinforcing stories, memories, and interpretations to maintain coherence. Observing thoughts feels like betrayal to the self-image you have been maintaining. Yet beneath this fear, something quieter is present, waiting without demand or definition. A different way of seeing does not attack identity. It simply loosens its grip. And to see that clearly, the frame itself must change. What if observing thoughts is not an action you perform, but a perspective that slowly reveals itself when effort loosens? The problem was never that thoughts appeared, but that they were treated as authorities rather than passing internal events. Identification happens automatically, like a reflex, not because you chose it, but because it once served a purpose. When that purpose fades, the habit remains, confusing familiarity with truth and repetition with meaning. The mind narrates because narration once helped you survive, understand patterns, and anticipate danger. But survival strategies rarely update themselves when the environment changes. They simply repeat what once worked. So observing thoughts feels unnatural, because it interrupts an ancient loop that expects participation. This is not about stopping thoughts, controlling them, or replacing them with better ones. It is about noticing that awareness was never inside the thought, but around it, before it, and after it. The shift is subtle, almost disappointing, because it lacks drama, effort, and visible achievement. Nothing is conquered, fixed, or improved, yet something essential is no longer entangled. And when this perspective settles quietly, something inside begins to soften without explanation. But that softness introduces a different kind of silence, one that feels unfamiliar at first. At first, the quiet feels empty, because the mind expects stimulation, commentary, and internal movement. Without constant interpretation, moments appear plain, unfinished, and strangely open. Thoughts still arise, but they no longer demand immediate agreement or emotional investment. They pass like sounds in another room, noticed without the urge to respond. This is not detachment or numbness, but a gentler relationship with inner experience. Awareness becomes a background presence, steady and reactive, and unconcerned with controlling outcomes. The mind may return to old patterns, but the return is seen, not condemned. Observation does not eliminate identity. It simply stops feeding it unquestioned belief. In this space, emotions move without needing stories to justify their existence. There is no instruction here, only recognition, and recognition does not require effort. Something has shifted quietly, and it does not announce itself with certainty. It waits for you to notice what has always been watching. At some point, you notice the mind searching for confirmation that something has changed. It looks for progress, clarity, or a new identity to hold onto, and present is proof. But the one who notices that search is not the mind itself. That noticing does not celebrate, judge, or explain what it sees. It simply reflects experience back, without commentary or emotional attachment. In that reflection, you may sense how often you were trying to become something, trying to be calmer, wiser, more aware, more in control of inner chaos. Yet awareness never needed improvement, because it was never the problem. The tension came from mistaking mental noise for the observer behind it. When that confusion loosens, there is nothing dramatic to replace it, just a quieter honesty about what thoughts are and what they are not. And in that honesty, the question of who you are feels less urgent. You are left with something simpler and more difficult to name. And this is where the mirror stops reflecting concepts and begins reflecting you. Nothing here asks you to believe anything new or adopt a different mindset. The invitation is quieter than that. Almost easy to miss. It is the recognition that observation was never something you needed to learn. It was what remained every time a thought ended and another had not begun. This does not end thinking, emotion, or identity in any dramatic way. Life continues with the same challenges, habits, and moments of confusion, but something listens differently now. Without urgency or resistance, that difference cannot be forced, practiced, or claimed as achievement. It reveals itself only when you stop reaching for it. So as this ends, notice what is present before the next thought appears. That space does not need an answer, only your attention. And perhaps curiosity will bring you back, not for more information, but for deeper seeing.